Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Broaden. Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. To introduce you to the audience, who do you say you are?
I'm sorry.
For anyone who doesn't know you, or to introduce you to the audience, who do you say you are?
My name is David Broaden, and currently I'm a chapter advisor for the NSBE CSRA Augusta Junior chapter, and also I'm a lifetime member of NSBE.
Nice. And starting back, how did you get involved with NSBE? And what is NSBE for anyone that isn't aware?
First of all, NSBE is the National Society of Black Engineers. My first exposure to NSBE was in 1975.
Hmm.
NSBE was having their first meeting, and that was during my senior year in college. And I became aware of it. And I was at Carnegie Mellon, and Carnegie Mellon has a recruiting program called the Carnegie Program. And I wasn't a member of the program, but I associated with with that group. And I heard about the meeting, and I asked them if it was possible for me to go. They were going to send two representatives, and they said no because I was a senior and uh, I wasn't going to be in school the following year.
Hmm.
Um, so that was my first exposure. And then I went off to grad school, and I went through two different work assignments, working for a consulting engineering firm and then going to work for Westinghouse,
Hmm.
and then eventually ending up with the Westinghouse Savannah River Company. And when I first got to the Westinghouse Savannah River Company, I met several engineers um, who were part of NSBE. They
Hmm.
had a chapter here called the Augusta Alumni Chapter.
Hmm.
And I met the president of the chapter was Keith Jernigan. And Keith and I talked, and Keith, one of the things that came up during our conversation was the fact that I was a registered professional engineer.
Hmm.
And Keith asked me if I would make a presentation to the group on the value of having your professional engineering registration.
Hmm.
So I did. And, I, met the people in the organization, enjoyed my interaction with them.
Hmm.
And I ended up joining NSBE at that point in time. I believe that was sometime in 92.
Wow. So almost 20 years from when you first heard about them, or am I getting my time a little bit off?
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm hard.
What was that about 20 years after you're graduating from college or from your senior year initially when you first found out about NSBE?
Um, it was 16 years because I
Gotcha.
graduated from grad school in 1976. Well, 77, so it was 15 years.
Gotcha. So I guess it's not too late for me then because I found out about NSBE in a similar way. It was my senior year, first semester, and then going to it, I was at Georgia Tech at the time. And when I walked into the room, like the first introductory meeting, they were almost like, "Oh man, you go to school here?" It's like, looks like we lost one. Like, come on over here."
Well, Georgia Tech, in terms of undergrad in Region 3, has the largest undergrad chapter in Region 3, and maybe the largest undergrad chapter in NSBE.
Oh
I'm not
wow.
sure about that, but I know in Region 3 they have the largest chapter.
Mm.
Um, One thing I will mention, and I wasn't aware of this until I met up with Keith,
Mhm.
that when I went to grad school, I could have joined NSBE.
Mm,
But at the University of North Carolina, which really doesn't have an engineering program, they have in their school of public health, they have an environmental engineering curriculum.
mhm,
But that was it. They didn't have any engineering. It's all the engineering in North Carolina is either at North Carolina A&T
mhm.
or at Duke University.
Gotcha.
So, but I mean, it's never too late, as you say.
Right. So help me understand how did you grow up as a young man? How did you become interested in engineering even to begin with?
Well, initially it wasn't engineering, it was architecture.
Mm,
When I was in fourth grade was the first time, other than teachers, was the first time I had any exposure to any type of professional person. And two architects came to my elementary school class and they were talking about architecture
mhm,
and, some of the things that they did. And I was interested in that. And I went home and told my mother I was going to build her a house because I was going to be an architect.
wow.
So, and that's all the way up until the time that I got into 10th grade. That was, for the next 6 years, that was the only professional person I had ever met. So I held on to that thought. And when I started thinking about college and everything, um, you know, I pursued Carnegie Mellon because I was in the Upward Bound program at Carnegie Mellon.
Mhm,
So I got exposure to other professionals at that point in time.
mm,
Um, and at that point in time, Carnegie Mellon, I think maybe three uh, African Americans were being admitted to the school each year out of, I think, 8,000 people.
wow.
And, um, I pursued my dream. I applied. I got accepted to the school of architecture. And the architecture program was supposed to be a 5-year program.
Mhm,
And somebody came up with a brilliant idea of compressing 5 years worth of school into 4 years. And I started with a class of 50 people, and just the workload it was just it's like we went to class every day from 8 to 4. We had a project due every day.
mhm.
We had class on Saturday from 8 to 12, and it was just a grueling environment. And the way the program was, it was very subjective in terms of some of the projects that you had to do. And I guess I was more used to concrete things,
Mm,
1 plus 1 equals 2,
right.
versus, you know, um, uh, doing a project and it being subjected to what somebody liked versus what they didn't like, regardless of how good it was.
Right.
Um, so I was in architecture for 2 years. I struggled and I ended up having to leave school after 2 years.
Why was that?
I'm sorry,
Why did you have to leave?
because I didn't have the grades to stay.
Gotcha.
You know, like I say, architecture was very grueling. And Um, I was on academic probation for uh, 3 semesters, and that was the decision the school made. I wanted to stay, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me
Mm.
that I ended up having to leave. And so I left, and uh, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And in the interim, I was looking for a job opportunity.
Mhm.
And the only skill set that I really had was drafting because I'd done a lot of drafting in middle school and high school
Mhm.
and won several awards for drafting. So I was looking for that type of opportunity and really did not, during in my initial efforts, I was unsuccessful in finding anything.
Mhm.
And then I got a fortunate break one day. Uh, I was getting ready to go home and I was waiting for the bus. And I saw a friend of mine who had been in Upward Bound with me. I was in Upward Bound at Carnegie Mellon. He was in Upward Bound at Pitt. And his name was Johnny Clark.
Mhm.
And Johnny, had had struggles in school too. And he was looking for a job while he made some decisions about what he wanted to do. And uh, uh, Johnny told me he was on his way up to the Urban League because he heard the Urban League had some job opportunities. So I asked if he mind if I would go up there with him, and he said, "No problem. Come on, let's go."
Mhm.
So we went up to the Urban League, and the only opportunities they had, which was fortunate for me, were two drafting opportunities um, with companies that had contacted the Urban League about wanting to try to assist with getting minorities into engineering via starting them in drafting.
Mhm.
And so I went to the first company was a company, it was a downtown company. It was by the name of Lorenzi Dobbs and Dunn. It was basically 10 minutes from my house.
Nice.
And, I interviewed with one of the partners, and he said, and I showed him all my work and everything. He
Mhm.
said, "That's great. You can start tomorrow." And I was extremely excited. He said, "But I want you to talk to one of the other guys." So I said, "Okay, no problem." So uh, I talked to the other guy, and the other guy said, "We'll let you know when we have an opportunity."
Oh, wow.
So I tell people in 5, 10 minutes, I got hired and fired in those 10 minutes. And I don't remember what transpired after that. Because again, they were trying to um, connect with the Urban League.
Mhm.
And again, this is back in 1970. And his one of the comments I heard when two of them were talking, like he's the one, like he's the person we're going to hire to satisfy the Urban League.
Mhm. So
And
you were
really,
almost looked at as a diversity hire.
yeah.
Gotcha.
And I guess I didn't like the way that was put.
Right.
So I decided I was going to pursue this other opportunity with a company by the name of Duncan Laniers and Associates.
Mm.
Now, the difference is Duncan Laniers and Associates, I had to take a bus downtown Um, I had a 30-minute ride to the top of this one hill to
Mm-hmm.
this top of Rochester Road. I had to take a bus down Rochester Road, and then I had to walk up the road for 10 minutes to get to the office,
Man.
you know. But when I met with Joe Liniers was the vice president of the company, and he was also the head of the design department. And Joe was very sincere about wanting to, not just to hire uh, an African American, but
Mm-hmm.
wanting to encourage them to get past just being a draftsman.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after several calls to the company to see if they were going to hire me, they eventually hired me. So I started out as being back in the 70s when you did drafting. They used to do um, drafting was done on some type of linen-like material,
Mm-hmm.
transparent linen-like material, or they would do sepias that were like or mylar. And so I was the person who was responsible for printing all these things up when
Mm-hmm.
they would do the drafting, and then they would um, have to put out specifications and drawings for upcoming projects. So I was the print person, the print guy.
Right.
And so I was the print guy for about a year. And um, and again, now I'm going to and from work with this uh, 3 bus route and walking up the road. But, despite the weather and everything, I was only late one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that impressed Joe Liniers and Phil Duncan, who was the president of the company. So one day, they called me into the office and said, uh, we're going to lend you this money. And the two of them, the president and vice president of the company, wrote out checks for $500 each.
Wow.
And I asked them, I said, well, how do you want me to pay you back? And they told me, you decide how you're going to pay us back.
Mm.
Now, at the same time, Joe was continuously encouraging me to get back into school.
Mm.
And what also happened, we developed a strong bond because I got to know his family and he got to know mine. And I really saw the sincerity in his heart for helping an African American get into engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in time, which was after a year, I decided I was going to make an effort to get back into school the following year. And I was going to change my major from architecture to engineering
Mm-hmm.
because Duncan and Yates and Associate was a consulting engineering firm that designed water and wastewater treatment plants.
Mm.
And I got exposed to that, and it's like I was not only doing this job as a draftsman, but I was learning about environmental engineering and about the wastewater treatment field. And so um, I pursued getting back into school, and in 72, I was readmitted to Carnegie Mellon into the civil engineering department.
Wow.
And um, but it was a conditional admittance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I I had to at least a 2.0 that semester.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've been out of school for 2 years, and I'm trying to readjust and trying to readjust to uh, a different program.
Hmm.
And it was tough, but through the help of the Carnegie Mellon Action Program and a guy by the name of Louis Overstreet, who was a civil engineer
Hmm.
um, when he went through college as a civil engineer. Um, I you know I was able to get my 2.0, and I mean I got exactly a 2.0, and I was able to stay. And I said to myself, I'm never going to be this close to getting a 2.0 again.
Yeah.
Now,
Were you having to go to work and school at the same time?
no, I was just going to school,
Gotcha.
but the one thing that Joe Lanier said when I went back to school was anytime I needed to, if I needed a job at any point in time, whether it be during the summer, during the holidays, then I would be able to come out there and work for them.
Gotcha.
Now, one thing, again, talk about this bond that Joe and I had. I didn't have, I had a bond with Phil, but not the same as Joe.
Hmm.
Um, and as I told you, I had to pay them back.
Right.
And so I made a conscientious effort to make sure I could pay them back by the time school would start.
Mm.
So when I got to the point where I was making my last payment, I went into Joe's office and I said, "Well, Joe, this is it." Joe said, "This is it, what?"
Mm.
I said, "This is the final payment." And I found out at that point in time that he and Phil trusted me enough that they weren't even keeping track of my repayments,
Mm.
you know, and I felt really good about that, that they felt, confident that, we trust him, he's going to do this. Um, and so, I went into, I was at Carnegie Mellon. I had to, uh, Carnegie Mellon is a couple policies they have.
Hmm.
You have to have a 2.0 overall and a 2.0 in your department to graduate. They also have a requirement that even if you retake a class, they
Hmm.
don't drop the previous grade.
Right.
So I had to make up um, for the fact that even though I got that 2.0, my overall average was less than a 2. So I had to keep building and building and building my average up, um, so that by the time I got to my senior year, I would have at least a 2.0, despite all those previous issues I'd had when I initially went to school. And um, Carnegie Mellon, uh, their civil engineering program, the head of the department was Dr. Fenvis. And I went to him at the beginning of my second semester senior year and expressed my concern that I wasn't sure because of the Carnegie Mellon's policies that I was going to be able to graduate, even though I had probably like a 2.9 in the department.
Right.
And he said, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to look into it and I'll let you know." And he came back and said, "Don't worry about it. You get a 2.8, 2.9 this semester, and you won't have any issues with graduating."
Mm.
And I did and graduated. And during that time frame, again, I'm still interacting with Joe Linays, even though I'm only working out there on a limited basis. But Joe had become my mentor.
Hmm.
And so Joe and I had a discussion. He says, well, what do you want to do after you graduate? And we had previous conversations about the fact that I wanted to go to grad school.
Hmm.
And also during those conversations, Joe had indicated that he was opening up a job in the design department, which I really wanted this job in the design department.
Mm.
And I was caught in between, do I go to school? Do I and miss out on this opportunity to work in the design department under Joe?
Hmm.
And let me express one thing about Joe. Joe was at that time he was the youngest president of the Water Pollution Control Federation, and he, along with uh, one of the other engineers in the company, had written a lot of books that are widely used throughout the wastewater treatment industry.
Mm.
He and Jim Ryan. And so, I mean, it was a very, very good situation to work under him, because I mean, I'd learned a lot already.
Right.
I mean, I got to go out to wastewater treatment plants, interacted with operators, interacted with contractors. I was steadily built my skill set. Well, Joe's solution was this. If you want to go to grad school, then he said, let me know to go to the University of North Carolina,
Hmm.
um, University of Michigan. I think the other one was University of Manhattan.
Mm.
He said, and I'll make efforts to help you get into the school. Now, at the time, Joe, in addition to being the vice president of the company, was an adjunct professor at UNC. He was an adjunct professor at University of Pittsburgh also.
Oh, wow.
And so his thing to me was, if you decide you want to go to school, I'll do everything I can to get you into the school, and I'll hold the job for you until you graduate.
Wow.
So I was like, well, I mean, without in UNC, I'd been a UNC basketball fan for years. So I
Hmm.
told him I wanted to pursue going to UNC. And he said, no problem. I'm going to call a couple people at the school. You still have to take the GRE
Hmm.
and do well on the GRE. But he called up Dan Oken, who's professor emeritus in the School of Public Health, Environmental Engineering, Water Resources program.
Hmm.
And I got admitted to the program.
Nice.
And, Joe continued to be my mentor during that entire time frame. Um, when I came home for the holidays in the summer, I was able to work at the company in an engineering capacity. Um, and um, I was given, they started a new program. They started a new portion of the business.
Hmm.
It was called infiltration inflow. And what it was going around and evaluating how extraneous waters were getting into um, sewer systems and eventually ended up down at the wastewater treatment plants.
Right.
And so there were several of their clients that they wanted to, that they were planning to conduct these studies on, but they wanted somebody to put together a program or an approach for how to do that.
Mm.
Now, I'm still in college, at the time. I'm just working for the summer, and they hired a guy out of Notre Dame by the name of Tom Hartwick, and he said, "I want you and Tom to put this program together."
Hmm.
And so they just left it up to us, and Tom and I put this program together, and that program became the basis for future work that they did. And we put the program together, implemented the program, and for two of their largest clients, were successful in reducing the amount of extraneous water getting down to the, come up with recommendations for reducing the extraneous water getting down to the wastewater treatment plants.
Hmm.
And I felt accomplished at that point in time.
Hmm.
So, and there were other things that Joe had said. One of the things Joe had said, um, and again, he said, when you graduate from Carnegie Mellon, I'm going to start a scholarship program for minority engineers at the University of Pittsburgh. And he did.
Hmm.
And, he said, it's only going to be a little bit of money, but you have to put things in perspective. A little bit of money to me is different from what a little bit of money is to somebody who's a vice president of a company.
Right.
So it was a considerable amount of money. Matter of fact, at one point in time, he told me he'd never told his wife how much money he put into this program. And but he did.
Hmm.
And so uh, like I say, I went to grad school. I ended up graduating. I came back, and sure enough, Joe still had a job available for me. And I started working underneath him. And, it's interacting with Joe taught me a lot. One of the things I thought I was a fairly good writer,
Hmm.
but in writing certain types of documents that the company needed me to produce, I didn't until Joe said something to me after he read one of my reports. I didn't grasp the fact that you have to write these documents so that the entire audience of people who are reading it can understand it.
Hmm.
You know, I had a habit prior to that of using big words in my documents, but some of these documents were being read by people who were superintendents at wastewater treatment plants
Hmm.
who may have only had a high school education. Um, some of these documents were being read by um, boards for various townships who didn't understand the wastewater treatment field.
Hmm.
So I had to simplify the documents to put out a good document, but make
Hmm.
it understandable to a lot of people. So my writing really improved as a result of Joe saying that to me.
Hmm.
So uh, I worked at the company. I think I ended up being there for, let me see, I started in 77 and I worked there until 84. So I worked for 7 years.
Hmm.
Now, during that time frame, the company went through a transition um, where Joe and Phil and another partner by the name of John Brocious made a decision to sell the company.
Hmm.
And when they sold the company, um, we partnered with a company out of New Jersey, and they decided to come up with a structure where, based on your performance, um, they made decisions about making people associates of the company.
Mm.
Because it was called Duncan Liaison and Associates, but really the only people who were associates were, Joe and Phil and John.
Hmm.
And I became an associate. I kept getting more responsibility in the company. I worked on several design projects. Um, and also during that tenure, um, I ended up going over to the operations side of the house.
Mm.
So now I had an opportunity to take some of the things that I thought I knew
Hmm.
and get out into the field and interact more with the plant operators. And I had to really gain an understanding of process control,
Mm.
you know, because I was the person who, when they had issues at the plant, to advise them how to keep their plant functional so that they met the the uh, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Resources discharge requirements.
Mm.
Okay, so and situations would come up. I mean, again, a lot of these plants still had extraneous water coming in there, and what you didn't want to do is lose your microorganism population
Hmm.
in your wastewater treatment system by being flushed out. So you had to advise them how to make adjustments to uh, counteract that, to account for that. And at the same time, if there were issues that they didn't advise you on in time, how to bring the plant back up into um, compliance within a short period of time.
Gotcha.
So, I went between the two areas, and then I also got involved in startup.
Mm.
So, uh, uh, I'm actually going out there and observing the contractors every day, um, seeing how contractors went about various things, for, various activities in terms of uh, bringing the equipment online, understanding, getting a more detailed understanding of the equipment and how to operate it and how it functioned. And uh, so the one major benefit of working for Duncan Nunez is that it's a small consulting firm, so you have to know everything.
Mm. Right.
Versus if you go to work for, you know, like some of the larger companies out there were like Metcalf and Eddy and Camp Dresser and McKee.
Hmm.
And if you went to work for those companies, you would only work on a portion of a wastewater treatment plant,
Right.
or you might be involved in some activity associated with the design of a sewer system. But it took you several years to get to the point where you'd have an opportunity to get full exposure to the full system. Well, DLNA, Duncan Liaison and Associates, didn't have time for that. You had to come up to speed in a hurry.
Right.
And um, you know, I mean, even though after 7 years, I left to do something else, you know, uh, I still maintain a really good knowledge of wastewater treatment plants
Mm.
and their operation. And again, like I say, Joe was my mentor, and um, we've stayed in touch ever since I met him, which was in 1970. And uh, during Labor Day,
Hmm.
I was back in Pittsburgh, and Joe and his wife, Pat, the three of us got together for dinner. And then Joe arranged a breakfast that Saturday um, for some of the former guys I used to work with to come and have breakfast.
Hmm.
And I guess the one thing to show you, again, I started as the print guy. I went from the print guy, and the building has four floors: a first floor, a second floor, a basement, and a sub basement. So my initial office was in the sub basement.
Hmm.
So when I became a draftsman, my office was in the basement.
Right.
And when I became an engineer, my office was on the second floor. And so, as far as I know, I was the only person to ever go through that whole process and ended up becoming an engineer. Now, to show you the benefit of working for a company like DLNA, um, to get your professional engineering license, you're required to have 4 years of experience
Hmm.
before you can apply, with the exception being that if you've gone to grad school, you only need 3 years.
Right.
Well, because I had that experience of working during the summer, that cut off another 6 months. So I was able to take the exam after 2.5 years. So, and DLNA had a thing about uh, the majority of people in the company, not everybody,
Hmm.
but the majority of people in the company passed the test the first time they took it.
Hmm.
And so I took the tests a year and a half before most of the other people, and I passed it my first time,
Nice.
you know. And again, because Joe was trying to give me so much exposure, they start branching out to doing work in, wanting to do work in Ohio and West Virginia.
Hmm.
And Joe picked me to be the person that he wanted to have licensed in those two states
Hmm.
to head up the work. Okay. So, but that sort of changed a little bit when they sold the company. But I was licensed in all three of those states. So that took me up until, like I say, 84.
Hmm.
And in 84, um, I decided I wanted to do something different. And I pursued an opportunity with Westinghouse. And I worked for what was called the Machinery Technology Division of Westinghouse. And Machinery Technology Division was set up to work with NAVC 56Y1. And interesting enough, they had nothing, none of the opportunities that they had anything to do with wastewater treatment.
Hmm.
So I had to go in again and learn something different. And I worked for a guy by the name of Mike Authors.
Hmm.
And Mike was impressed with my background and impressed with how, after talking with him, how he felt I could quickly come up to speed um, in terms of handling programs.
Hmm.
So, um, one of the programs that NAVC wanted to do, uh, was called smoke control. And what smoke control related to when naval combatants are under fire and, there end up being fires on the ship,
Hmm.
they have firefighting protocols or diagrams for fighting fires, but there were a lot of times they would look, a ship might be lost because they weren't controlling the spread of smoke throughout the ship. So they wanted an understanding of what their capabilities were to locally and remotely, secure hatches, dampers, and fans
Hmm.
to reduce the spread of smoke throughout the ship. So Mike Authors assigned that task to me. Okay. And, um, it gave me an opportunity to, I was interfacing with not only 56Y1, I was interfacing with damage control schools
Hmm.
and firefighting schools, the David Taylor Naval Safety Center, which is up in Annapolis.
Right.
And so, and I'm interfacing with, and I'm going out and doing ship checks,
Hmm.
because drawings, sometimes you get drawings from, that aren't up to, um, they aren't updated.
Hmm.
And so I had to make sure that I wasn't coming up with some instructions that couldn't be implemented because I'm looking at outdated drawings. So I had to go out to ship check and basically, for these different combatants, whether they be um, uh, frigates, whether they be cruisers, whether they be destroyers. Uh, even went out on aircraft carriers, but you really can't. Aircraft carriers or their ventilation systems are a lot different, and it's
Hmm.
very hard to control smoke on aircraft carriers. Um, but I ended up doing all these diagrams, getting confirmation from, like I say, the damage control schools and firefighting schools. We did smoke control tests down in Mobile, with David Taylor.
Hmm.
We also went to the Naval Academy and did smoke control tests.
Right.
You know, the difference being that the smoke control tests in Mobile were on a just an old barge or something like that.
Hmm.
It wasn't an actual ship. But when we went to the Naval Academy, we actually um, went aboard the Clifton Sprague and did smoke control tests there. And the test validated the instructions and that it provided
Hmm.
and made, you know, some of the officers on board aware of situations they weren't aware of. Like there are bulkheads there that are, um, they would believe for different reasons that they would control the spread of smoke, but they wouldn't.
Hmm.
Okay. And they were called fume type bulkheads.
Hmm.
And when we did the tests at the Naval Academy, I, you know, we had to go around the ship and advise the personnel and the officers that, of any areas that might be affected. And the uh, when I went to the uh, the not the captain, but the second in command,
Hmm.
and told him because he was going to be in his office. I said, "Well, when we do the test in this area, it's going to spread and it's going to go through this bulkhead, and um, you're going to be affected."
Hmm.
And he didn't believe me,
Hmm.
and he said, "This bulkhead won't. I'm not worried about it. This bulkhead will stop the spread of smoke."
Right.
So we started the test with him in his office, and 15 minutes after we started the test, he came out and said, "You were right." So I say that because during that time frame, Westinghouse started what was called their Signature Award of Excellence.
Mm.
And the work that I had done was submitted to, uh, first of all, it was submitted to the division. And uh, I ended up winning the Machinery Technology Division Award
Mm.
for that. And then they subsequently submitted it for the Signature Award of Excellence. And they had three levels. Um, they had gold, silver, and bronze.
Mm.
And they were only going to award 10 golds throughout the entire corporation and 20 silver awards.
Hmm.
And I ended up, um, of those 30 people, in the bronze, there was unlimited number of bronze.
Mm.
Um, but of those 30 people, I was the only African American person to win the silver award. Well, one of those awards. I won a silver award.
Mm.
Um, and so I felt pretty good about that. And I got a lot of different responsibilities associated with that. And that program did extremely well. And uh, as a result of some of the things that I did, um, I was given uh, other opportunities in Westinghouse. Um, Westinghouse had a project where they were dealing with PCBs at various sites
Hmm.
where they had disposed of transformers uh, and the oil from the transformers, which had contained PCBs, had
What are
leaked into the
PCBs?
ground.
What are PCBs?
Polychlorinated biphenyls.
Okay.
Uh,
Which
it's
are,
it's a hazardous substance,
gotcha. Okay.
and they were leaking into. They would put them in landfills, and they were in some cases unlined landfills,
Mm.
and um, and they were leaking into the ground, and they were trying to come up with a solution for addressing that.
Gotcha.
And so um, the head of that division, they created this new division,
Hmm.
and the head of that division was a guy by the name of Roy Thomas. And Roy Thomas had been my general manager at Machinery Technology Division. And Roy was aware of my environmental background. And he came he came back to the division and asked him to loan me to his division
Hmm.
so that I could help them address the problems. And it's a small division. I mean, it had, I'm not sure how many people it had in the division, but pretty much all my meetings were with Jim Little, who was the vice president of the division. I would be Jim's consultant, I'm going to say, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of going out and providing advice on this and providing advice on that. Um, Now they ended up going a different route afterwards, but again, I got an opportunity because of some of the things I had done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things I'd done either with DLNA or some of the things I had done with Machinery Technology Division. So I was with them for maybe about a year, close to a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up getting married, and I was trying to figure out how my wife and I were going to get together because she was in Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and she was working for the government. She worked for Naval Audit at the time. And fortunately, um, the Savannah River site had an office in D.C., which was the interface between the Savannah River site and DOE headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became aware of that, and I interviewed for a position that gave me an opportunity to interface with one of the DOE division directors.
Mm-hmm.
And the division director had responsibility for one area, but he also had responsibility for the budget and schedule. So I guess one of the things that had been noted throughout my career is that I was very meticulous. So that that gave me that opportunity to get involved with that, and that turned out well. Um, and I was there. Let me see. And I moved to DC, and I think we were there for about 15 months. And then the Cold War ended.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Cold War ended, we closed up the office, and they made it possible for um, people who worked out of the DC office to pursue opportunities at the site. And so I ended up coming to the site and working, getting a position in the high level waste environmental program. And I was responsible for the air programs at the time. And so, that got me back into the environmental side of the house.
Right.
And uh, eventually working at the Savannah River site, I not only got involved with the air programs, I got involved with the RECWA programs, um, and I had different opportunities to, you know, utilize my innovativeness and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and that worked out. That worked out well. I enjoyed that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, in particular because I had opportunity to pretty much work independent for the most part. Um, and like I say, to provide my expertise in certain cases. And after several years of doing different things, I ended up retiring. And during that time frame, I was intimately involved with NSBE.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was involved with the local chapter. I ended up becoming the president of the chapter. And then I ended up wanting to be more involved with NSBE, and I ended up being uh, the chair elect
Mm.
for Region 3 professionals, and then I ended up being the chair for a while, which gave me a lot of different exposure. Um, now instead of just seeing or interacting with NSBE people who were in my chapter
Hmm.
and then in my region, now I'm interacting with NSBE people throughout the country with headquarters, um, you know, um, and there was that interface between the collegians and the professionals.
Mm.
So I got to know a lot of people that way, and that worked out well. And during that time that I was on the board, uh, there was uh, they wanted to increase the number of life members. Um, I think I'm going to say maybe they had about 60 lifetime members at the time,
Hmm.
maybe 60, maybe something like that. And they want to increase your number, and I decided that I was going to become a lifetime member.
Hmm.
But I also decided, and I had, I wanted my son to be a lifetime member. Now, at the time, uh, my son was uh, uh, only in high school,
Mm.
but he was an NSBE member,
Right.
and so, but I wanted to be something unique. So, as the numbers increased,
Hmm.
I I decided I would try and make an effort to um, secure lifetime member number 99 for myself,
Mm.
and lifetime member 100 for my son.
Mm.
And I was fortunately able to do that. And so my son became the youngest lifetime member in NSBE and the only non-collegiate or non-professional to be a lifetime member.
Mm.
And we became the only father-son lifetime members in NSBE. You know, and to this day, we may still be the only father-son lifetime members in NSBE. I'm not sure,
Right.
but it was an opportunity because as I'm going to these conferences and conventions, we made it a family vacation.
Mm.
And so during that time, my wife would be chauffeuring my son around, or uh, uh, she would be uh, taking him to workshops. She would be taking him to the career fairs, giving him that exposure
Hmm.
to get a feel for whether or not he wanted to be in engineering. Because
Hmm.
people would ask me, were you trying to make your son an engineer like you? I said, no, I'm just trying to give him exposure to allow him to make decisions.
Right.
And so, um, because, my son became in NSBE, they have something called Apex,
Hmm.
which is a pyramid of excellence. And it's for somebody with a three something average or better. And what that provides you with is an opportunity when they have the career fair. They allow you, there's a 1 hour period at the very beginning of the career fair where only
Mhm.
Apex students can have access to the companies. And, you probably see maybe in terms of all the people who are there, maybe you see 5% of the people who want to go to the career fair are
Mhm.
there during that time frame. So my son had all this time to really go in and really talk with people and get an understanding of what type of opportunities were available at various companies.
Right.
And so his interest was related to computers.
Mm.
So he was talking with the Microsofts, the Intels, the Yahoos, the Googles, those types of companies. And he found out about opportunities with them. And, fast forward, um, that exposure translated into him being able go to a Google summer camp up in New York at the end of his just before he started his sophomore year
Mhm.
in school. And, he went to the Google summer camp and he came back and he was like, Dad, I have to do all the rest of my internships with Google.
Mm.
And of course I told him, I said, son, everybody wants to work for Google. You're gonna have to, keep your grades up. You're gonna have to um, maintain your community involvement. There's all these different things you're gonna have to do. Um, And to make a long story short, he went back to school, and I didn't know what he was going to do about that. I called him a couple months later. He'd already applied for a summer internship,
Mhm.
and when we were going on vacation at Christmas, he got a call from Google making an offer to him,
Oh, wow.
and then he afterwards he gave us the details, saying he had had to go through 4 interviews to get that opportunity, and so one of the things that I do when I talk with our NSBE junior members in our local chapter, CSRA Augusta Junior chapter,
Mhm.
is I try to explain to them the value of getting this exposure and how that exposure can translate to opportunities
Right.
and the benefit of them going to conferences and to the convention and be an active participant in the career fair. And so, with our chapter here, and and the numbers vary,
Mhm.
we've had as many as 90 people in the chapter, but people graduate, people move. I think currently we have about 50 people. Our thing is, can we give them that exposure? So, to me, exposure is them having opportunities to see it, to talk with people, um, to get feedback in terms of their goals and dreams.
Mm.
Um, so we've taken them to the BMW plant, we've taken them to Boeing, we've taken them to Bridgestone Golf, we've taken them to Club Car, Tektron, uh, the Bridgestone tire plants. Uh, gosh, uh, we've gone to numerous fall regional NSBE fall regional conferences, Region 3 fall regional conferences.
Mhm.
And, I was, animate that we take as many as people as possible. So we'd end up taking a busload of students and parents, and we ended up being the largest contingency at the Region 3 fall regional conference. That sort of changed in the last few years with COVID.
Mhm.
Um, but we're trying to get back to that point. Uh, but again, it's all about them getting the exposure.
Right.
And, um, you know, we, we're very committed to another part of NSBE. A lot of people look at the National Society of Black Engineers and they think the technical side,
Mm.
but there's also the leadership side. So we try to, as much as possible, promote leadership within our organization. So we have um, a NSBE Junior Executive Board,
Mm.
and the way it's set up is every month they need to meet as much as possible and talk about what information they want to present to the rest of the chapter members at the next meeting.
Mm.
Um, and then they have to put together an agenda. And then they have to meet with the chapter advisor, myself and Ronald O'Brien, and talk about that agenda. And we go over the agenda with them and maybe make suggestions for additions or identify where I think they need to be a little more clear in terms of what they're presenting to the membership.
Right.
But then, right after that, we have the meeting and they control the meeting.
Mm.
Ron and I sit by and maybe they'll give us a few minutes to say something. Um, but they do that. They have activities. They have various responsibilities for, um, where one of the members is working to get our website up and going. And so they have various responsibilities. And the biggest thing is for them to interact with the membership. Now, one thing that makes our chapter unique from a lot of NSBE chapters, um, several NSBE chapters are school-related chapters.
Mm.
So, the majority of members go to that school. They pretty much live in the same neighborhoods. Uh, our chapter spans what's called the CSRA Central Savannah River area,
Mm.
which comprises Richmond County, Grovetown, Evans, North Augusta, Aiken, uh, just several communities. And so when I talk with parents, and we get members by word of mouth. When I talk with parents, I tell parents, I said, well, the first thing we work on with all our members is getting them out of their comfort zone,
Mm.
and they have to learn to communicate and interface
Right.
with people who don't live in their community and don't go to their school.
Mm.
And so I think that's valuable because it provides and they're not aware that they're getting this skill set.
Mm.
But if you think about it, what's the first thing you do when you go to college? See a whole bunch of people that you don't know,
Right.
and you trying to figure out how to make friends, how to interface with them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, if that's your first time trying to gain that skill set, you're going to struggle.
Right.
Well, by the time our chapter members go to college, they've already mastered that skill set.
Right.
You know, I mean, when we go, like say, when we go to conferences and everything, they interface with everybody,
Mm.
because that's what we do on a regular basis. So, um, I guess, I guess that's my long story about my journey through NSBE. Um, and, the one thing, and I don't know if other chapters have themes or not,
Hmm.
but we have a theme. Our theme is our kids, our future, help
Hmm.
them realize their dreams. And that's the theme that we present to supporters. That we also let supporters know that NSBE is for any and everybody,
Hmm.
any ethnic origin, race, and the only thing that NSBE wants you to do is be committed to following your mission,
Hmm.
which is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. That's all they're looking for you to do. And NSBE has grown from 50 people getting together in 1975 to, from local colleges and universities
Hmm.
to somewhere around 30 some thousand people internationally,
Hmm.
and that's another benefit of, being a member is you're not just interfacing with people from here. You may be interfacing with somebody from India, somebody from Africa, somebody from uh, Italy. You don't know who you're going to be, Jamaica.
Right.
You don't know who you're going to be interfacing with, but that's okay because it provides another learning point for our chapter members.
Mm.
So, like I say, that's my journey through NSBE, and as long as I can, I will continue that journey. More so, it's not about me, it's about the kids.
Right.
And whatever I can do for them, I will. And I will also mention that, even though our primary focus is kids in the CSRA, we do have a couple kids out of Columbia, South Carolina, and a
Hmm.
couple kids out of Charlotte, North Carolina,
Mm.
you know, who are members of our chapter. So, um, uh, and we've had exposure as at the recent convention, um, the two members out of Columbia, South Carolina
Hmm.
are my niece and nephew. And one is 16 and the other is 10. But they also have a younger sister who's 6.
Hmm.
So we went to the convention and there's no way I could leave her at home. So she's went to the convention. She got exposure just as well as they did.
Hmm.
And she loved it.
Hmm.
And she's a young gamer and she's really good at it at 6 years old. At 6 years old, she's better than her 10-year-old brother, her 10-year-old brother.
Wow.
Uh, and but she's an excellent student at the same time. And she's one of these people who um, already um, interfaces and communicates with any and everybody.
Yeah.
So when we went to the convention, she met a lot of people, and a lot of people know her name,
Hmm.
you know. And uh, I'm one of these believers. Like one of the things, even with our chapter, parents will come to me and say, "Well, I have some other kids, but they're not old enough to be NSBE members." I said, and that's not a problem. Have
Hmm.
them come to the meetings and you know meet people, be exposed. Sometimes because of their young age, we can't take them on certain trips.
Hmm.
But you know, I don't think it. I think the earlier you start kids doing things, the easier it is for them to adapt to that.
Mm.
And so, I, like I said, we have 50 members, but I don't know how many people have younger brothers and sisters that they bring.
Right.
We have a lot of programs that are designed for the younger kids. We have a first Lego League team, and we have Sony Couve, and both of those are robotics uh, coding activities. The
Mm.
difference being with Sony Couve does not have a competition associated with it. It's strictly learning to code, learning to build robots, and you know, building up that skill set. Now we use that as a feeder for our first Lego League team because in both instances they're learning the program with Scratch.
Mm.
Now, first Lego League is a competition, and they actually have a game board and they have missions on this game board, and you have to figure out how to program a robot to accomplish these missions to acquire certain points. Now, but it's not just about that.
Mhm.
There are other things, there's core values associated with First Lego League. You have to do an innovation project, which requires you to do research.
Mm.
So, again, if you think about it, and a lot of these kids who are part of First Lego League team are in uh, upper middle school. I'm sorry, in early middle school
Mm.
to late elementary school.
Mm.
So now they're acquiring a skill set that they're going to need later on in high school, you know,
Right.
in particular doing research.
Mm.
And um, that's been a challenge. But I was talking with the first Lego League coach, Zelda Taylor, and she was telling me about their innovation project that they're working on this year.
Mhm.
And I was impressed with the idea. Let me just share that with you real quick.
Okay.
Their project relates to sharks because it's the theme this year for First Lego League is submerged, so it has to be something related to the ocean or something like that.
Mhm.
So sharks, there's a situation where sharks are captured and their fins are removed because the fins are used in a soup.
Mm.
And so some of the sharks die, some of them don't die, but now they're thrown back into the water
Mhm.
with no fins. Well, their fins are what allow them to maneuver and propel themselves through the water.
Right.
And would and as they propel themselves through the water and the water rushes through their gills, that allows them to get oxygen. So
Mm.
if they can't do that, they're going to die.
Right.
So their initial thrust, and this is in it's in the preliminary stage,
Mhm.
is to come up with a prosthesis for sharks.
Mm.
And I like the idea. It's got challenges.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of questions that need to be answered. But again, it's showing they're thinking out of the box,
Mm.
you know. And the innovation project, when you do an innovation project, it can either be a new idea or it can be an improvement.
Mm.
Um, I think in this case, they're looking to uh, sort of both there's some new ideas coupled with improving some things that are being looked at.
Mhm.
Um, um, but um, I don't know, excuse me, I don't know where, how far they've gotten on that. I
Mhm.
just like the idea. It's something that when they first talked about the theme, you know, I I don't know how they got there. They obviously did a lot of research to screen out a lot of things, and I, I don't know what they did, but I'm impressed with it. And
Mhm.
that's what we want to happen with our NSBE Junior kids. We want them to grow. We want them to think out of the box.
Right.
We want them to, like, when they do this, they'll be, they're not just going to do this in a vacuum. And then the first time they present it, it's going to be at a competition. They're actually going to, they've already gone to an aquarium and talked with oceanographers.
Right.
Okay. So they may contact them once they come up with this idea and relay that to them and see what the oceanographer feels about it.
Mhm.
Um, you know, they'll share it with other people. There can be other engineering people who don't have that background in
Right.
oceanography and just get their feedback. Because sometimes, if you're just dealing with the people who are, like, say, the experts in the area,
Mhm.
then they're going to have preconceptions. But if you deal with somebody who doesn't know anything, they're going to be more inquisitive. They're going to ask you more questions.
Mhm.
And that's what they need to refine this project. And so that's what we want to come out of being involved with our NSBE Junior chapter. You know, we want when these kids leave for college, uh, our goal is to keep in touch with the families. Our goal for them is to have uh, made a lot of new friends that they would not have otherwise made if they weren't a part of NSBE.
Right.
And we want them to have an understanding of how to shape their career because of the exposure we give them.
Mhm.
Okay, so with that said, I don't know if I have anything else to add to that.
I think you did a great job, and it really ties into your joining NSBE, speaks to your introduction into engineering because like you did um getting into architecture, it's like it wasn't something that worked out for you, but having the buy-in from those that hired you and really building that relationship and that friendship, it I think that helped you into how you went about college, joining the civil engineering group, becoming an environmental engineer, and then pivoting into like what you learned into wastewater treatment and just being open and exposed to those opportunities as they came your way.
Yeah, and and I think I think I've learned a lot, you know,
Mhm.
and gained valuable skill sets. But I think that there's a lot more opportunity for our chapter members to gain skill sets that will be even more, it will be unique and even more uh, valuable than the skill sets that I've gained.
Mm.
I think they have that potential.
Right.
Um, um, so um, I mean, there are other things I've done, and you know, I'm a proponent of kids learning math, for
Mhm.
example. And, one of the things that I found by going into various elementary schools, just a second,
Mhm.
by going into various elementary schools, is that kids, when kids are in, let's say, up to third grade, you're very eager to learn
Mhm.
math and all other subjects. Then, depending on the amount of help they get after third grade, they start struggling with math and they get turned off by it. They don't like it.
Mhm.
And so that's another sidebar that I've done is gone into the elementary schools and work with kids with math. Now, eh, if you've learned anything about me, uh, I try to be innovative, creative, and not deal with the traditional all the time.
Mhm.
So my approach to helping these kids is helping them do math in their heads, mental math.
Mhm.
So I go into the school and I tell them I'm going to teach them math. And, I tell them no pencils, no paper,
Mhm.
but we're going to learn. And, you know, there are a lot of math tricks out there, which I have adopted to um, where I either add a short story to help them uh, understand that math concept.
Mhm.
Okay. Or I explain it, I explain the trick to them in a different way that is different from the way the trick is presented. Might be in another math book or something like that.
Right.
Um, One of the things, and I have a two-book series that I wrote, but the first book deals with teaching kids numerical series.
Mhm.
A lot of kids, when I grew up, you could learn to count by five by putting nickels in front of kids, 5, 10, 15, 20.
Mhm.
Dimes in front of a kid, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Putting quarters in front of a kid, 25, 50, 75, 100. But what about those other numerical series? What about the threes? What about the sevens? What about the nines?
Mhm.
Okay. So again, I try to think out of the box and try to relate that to what do kids like to do when they're younger. And kids like to do a lot of games. They do mazes.
Mhm.
They do connect the dots. Well, connect the dots are traditionally done A, B, C, D, E, but why can't they be done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3,
Mhm.
6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30?
Mhm.
And if you provide that repetition, okay, then if they learn that numerical series, then they'll learn to add and multiply by that number. You think about it. Most kids have no problem multiplying by 5 or 10,
Right.
but tell them to multiply by 7 or 9 and they struggle.
Mhm.
But once they learn these numerical series, that's another thing. Once they learn some of these math tricks, that's another thing. I had one student when I went to this local elementary school, because I go to the schools and I have eventually end up having competitions.
Mhm.
And teacher was telling me about this one kid who was doing really bad in math.
Mhm.
And and then all of a sudden she saw this improvement and she asked him, why, what caused this improvement? And when I go into the school system, I tell them about the struggles I went through in my undergraduate years
Mm.
and how I had to work to overcome that. And this one kid said, well, if Mr. Broaden could overcome his issues, he felt he could do that too.
Mhm.
Now, I felt good about that. Okay. Um, because it it gives them a sense of value, you know, that what they perceive to be hard, it's just a matter of them getting comfortable with it.
Right.
And once they get comfortable with it, and I've had some students that I helped and I had to take them all the way back to using flashcards. But once they got used to it,
Mhm.
that second year, I said, well, what can I help you with? Oh, no, we have this, you know. But if you've seen them a year earlier,
Mhm.
I hate math,
Yeah.
you know. So, with me, it's all about there's different ways to give kids exposure. There's different ways of helping kids.
Mhm.
You know, those are just NSBE and me going into the school system. Those are just a few ways that I have to help kids, like I say, realize their dreams.
Mhm.
No, kids don't, kids, everybody out there wants to be an achiever, but sometimes they need help.
Mhm.
Well, I try to be that person who's available to help them.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that tidbit in there in addition to Nesby.
I like that. How can people get in touch with you, or how can they find out more about the NSBE Junior chapter?
Uh, Two ways. One, the best way of contacting me is by email at Broaden, Broaden, the number 92 at bellsouth.net. Um, they can try and text me at 803-439-7100. And I emphasize text me because if I see numbers I don't recognize, I
Mhm.
don't answer those calls sometimes.
Gotcha.
Um, or, you know, you know, that's the best way. Or if they happen to see somebody like I'm wearing a red shirt,
Mhm.
if they see a student wearing a red shirt that says uh, CSRA Augusta Junior Chapter on it,
Mhm.
they can talk with that student about it. And that's one thing about, I don't know how other NSBE Junior chapters do.
Mhm.
Each region has a regional color, and Region Three's color is red.
Mhm.
So when somebody joins our chapter, we are we promote them getting a NSBE Junior shirt.
Mhm.
So a lot of times when you see pictures of our chapters, you'll see all these red shirts,
Mhm.
whether we're on a trip, whether we're in a meeting, you know, uh, you'll see all these red shirts. And so that's another way. Uh, every once in a while, we go, we make a presentation at college night. The unfortunate thing about college night is that we're catching somebody late in their high school years.
Mhm.
Okay. And it would have been nice for them to have had exposure earlier. But
Right.
what happens with college night, sometimes families will come and they'll bring their younger kids.
Mhm.
So we'll um, uh, have an opportunity to be exposed to those kids and them get information also. So those are the best ways.
Awesome. And from the first question I asked you, are you still who you said you were?
Am I still,
Who you said you were?
you mean, I don't understand. Am I still David Broaden?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'm still David Broaden. And, uh, I'm just David. Okay. I mean, most of the kids call me Mr. David.
Mm,
Okay. And I like that, that they're being very respectful. Um, and even some of the parents do. And I, you know, but I don't, I think the biggest thing I want to do is I want the kids to be comfortable around me.
mm,
Okay. I want them to feel that I'm a person they can talk with easily if they're struggling. Like, for example, one of our board members at our last conference Zoom call, she said, I need some help with math. I said, I can help you with that.
mm,
Now, I can, but at the same time, I referred her to something else because she's in middle school, and there's a website out there which I think is fantastic. It's called coolmath.com,
mm,
COOLMATH.com. It has pre-algebra, algebra, trigonometry, and it's done pretty much in the same way that I present math to kids through color coding numbers so
mm,
that they can see how things are linked together.
right.
Um, um, but I told her, I said, no problem. I said, I'll help you. I said, but you start with this, and I need to follow up with her.
Mm,
Um, but, I'm willing to help anybody, if they need help. And if I can't help them, and there are times when I can't help some of these kids,
mm,
you know, I mean, if they want to become more advanced in computer programming, gone are the days for when I did computer programming.
mm,
I'm okay with it, but there are other people who are more skillful at it than I am. And so I use the NSBE network also as a means for uh, letting other people share their skill sets with our NSBE Junior chapter members.
mm,
You know, um, we have an association with uh, the Augusta Lynx, and NSBE has a partnership as a whole at the corporate level. They have a partnership with the Lynx,
mm,
and so we have a partnership with the local chapter, and we may be partnering with the Aiken Lynx also in the near future.
okay.
But that allows them to get exposure to other people other than I'm gonna call technical people like myself.
Mm,
People who have other uh, areas of career areas that they could be getting exposed to.
mm.
You know, so it's all in whatever it takes to help a student out, help them realize their dream. That's it. That's what I'm about.
I like it. Thank
So
you. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today and sharing your story.
no problem. Hopefully, I didn't take too long.
No, you did great.
So
Until next time, I guess I can't really promise, but I might see you here in a couple weeks if plans still go accordingly.
okay, All right. No
Until then.
problem.